I was 31 years old the day my father gave my brother $1 million and gave me a sentence. We were standing in a rented hall outside Brindle, Pennsylvania. The whole family had driven in. My father lifted a glass, called my brother up to the front, and pressed a check into his hands to start a business. Everyone clapped. Then he turned to me, calm as a closing door, and said 4 words. Go earn your own. I didn't argue. I smiled. I thanked him. I sat back down. But what I did with the next 12 months, and what my grandfather did so quietly that none of them ever saw it coming, is the reason a lawyer would one day slide a single envelope across a polished table and make my father scream like a man watching the ground open under his feet. You have to understand, nobody clapping in that hall knew the first thing about me, and the one person who did wasn't clapping at all. Let me take you back. In my family, there was always a loud one and a steady one. My brother Ryder brought the energy into a room. I brought the spreadsheets. He was 2 years younger than me and treated like a firstborn son out of a storybook. I was the one who quietly did the taxes. I started keeping the family's books at 19. The year my father's books. Keeper quit and nobody else could read a ledger. Within a month, I caught a vendor double billing us $8,000. I never got a thank you. I just got handed more. By 25, I'd passed my CPA exams and taken a job at a small accounting firm 2 towns over. My family knew the title. Not one of them ever asked what I did with it. My mother had a way of summing me up. She'd say it gently, the way she said most of the worst things. Ryder carries the name. You just have it. My father, Gerald Stone, ran Stone Lumber and Supply, the yard that put half the roofs over half the town. But he hadn't built it. He'd inherited it from his own father, Walter, who started the whole thing in 1968 with one flatbed truck and a bad knee. I think that gap lived in my father like a splinter he couldn't reach. To prove he was a builder and not just an heir, he bet big. He took out a loan for a second warehouse, and he carved $1 million out of the family's future to crown Ryder the next great stone. The night of that party, while everyone toasted my brother, there was one man at the far end of the head table who never lifted his glass. My grandfather, 81 years old. He sat with his hands folded, and he looked straight at me, and he did not move them an inch. I noticed. I think he wanted me to, but I had no idea how bad it was about to get. I didn't cry that night. People always expect tears here. Instead, I drove home, made coffee, opened a fresh notebook, and wrote one word at the top of the first page. Start. The next morning, I drove out Route 9 to the lumber yard. I told myself I was just dropping off the quarterly numbers. That was a lie. The truth was, I wanted to see my grandfather. Walter was already there, because Walter was always already there. His chipped blue enamel mug sat on the counter where it had sat since before I was born. He poured me a coffee I hadn't asked for and slid it across without a word. I told him about the check. I told him what my father had said. I waited for comfort. Maybe an apology on my father's behalf. He gave me neither. He looked at me over that old mug and asked one question. So, what's the plan? Not are you okay? Not, that's not fair. What's the plan? I started to say I didn't have one, and stopped, because I did. I told him this half-formed idea of doing for small shops what I'd been doing for free for my family my whole life. Clean books, smart money, a way out of the hole. He listened to the end. Then he said the thing I'd carry like a stone in my pocket for a year. I'm not betting on the loud one, he said. I'm betting on the one who shows up. But it was a few weeks later, sorting old files for him, that the floor dropped out. I found the loan paperwork for the new warehouse. I read it the way I read everything. Slowly, twice. My father hadn't just borrowed against the business. He'd borrowed against what he expected to inherit from Walter someday. He was spending money he didn't have yet, on a promise no one had ever put in writing. His whole tower was leaning on a man who was 81 years old, and a signature that didn't exist. I didn't say a word. I filed it away, in the cabinet, and in my head. And that night, I made a decision that would change everything. The whispers started about a month later, soft ones, which is how the worst ones always are. Word went around the family that Grace was bitter, that I was jealous of my brother's gift, that I'd started some little side thing out of spite, to embarrass everyone. I knew exactly where it came from. Ryder had a gift for stories, and the one he was telling now was about a sister who couldn't be happy for him. My mother called me. She didn't ask how my work was going. She asked me, please, not to make things awkward at the next dinner. Don't embarrass us, she said, like I was the embarrassment. In a family handing a grown man $1 million to play office, I was working 18-hour days, at the firm by 7, my own clients until 10 at night, asleep before I remembered to eat. I didn't have much of a life outside the ledgers. That was my flaw, if you want one. I carried everything myself and let almost no one close enough to help. It made me good at the work, and it made me lonely in the world. Then, my brother had his launch party. Exposed brick, a wall of glass, the kind of office that costs more to look successful in than to actually be successful. My parents came. My mother wore a new dress and told everyone her son was an entrepreneur. My father stood by the window with his arms crossed, proud the way men are proud of things they lie. Very entrenchy, I went because not going would have been a statement, and I wasn't ready to make statements yet. So I stood at the back and watched $1 million move in the wrong direction. And standing there, I understood something. Nobody in my family was ever going to wake up one morning and decide I'd worth backing all along. I realized then, no one was coming to save me. I had to save myself. So I went quiet, and I went to work. My first real client found me by accident. Tom Vasquez ran a one-man repair shop off Main Street, the kind of place that fixes your lawnmower and your marriage in the same afternoon. He was drowning. 3 vendors owed. His books were a shoebox. The bank had stopped returning his calls. I had no money to lend him. I want to be clear about that, because this is where people expect a rich relative to swoop in. There was no rich relative. There was just me and a notebook. So I did the only thing I knew how to do well. I went through every number in that shoebox. I restructured what he owed. I found him a small line of credit at a credit union that still believed in handshakes. I renegotiated 2 of his vendor contracts, down to something a human being could actually pay. I charged him a modest fee, and I wrote a real agreement, signed and dated, so we both knew exactly where we stood. That night, I gave the thing a name. I wrote it across the top of a fresh file. Stone Ventures. Week by week. Quietly, methodically, Tom sent me 2 more men from his street. They came in embarrassed and left with a plan. By midsummer, I had 6 clients, then 8. I'd take a struggling shop, clean its books, find it a little funding through people who trusted my word, and take a fair cut when it worked. Then I'd put my cut back in and do it again. I wasn't getting rich. I was getting real. And almost every evening, I'd swing by the yard with a folder for Walter, even when I didn't need to. He started asking questions that went deeper than a grandfather making conversation. How did I structure the small deals? Who held the risk? Who held the paper? One rainy night, he asked me to write the whole thing down for him. The complete shape of how Stone Ventures worked. I made him a clean 1-page summary and didn't think twice. I should have asked him why he wanted it. They had no idea what was coming. And neither, it turned out, did I. A week later, Walter called me to the yard for what he said was a business matter. When I got there, Tom Vasquez was already standing by the counter, hat in his hands, looking like a man summoned to witness something. Walter set a single sheet of paper on the counter between us, in the smell of cut pine and machine oil, and told me to read it. It was a term sheet, Walter Stone wished to invest $40,000 into Stone Ventures. My fund, written as a real investment, terms, a return, a signature line. Why, Tom? I asked. Because a thing this important, he said, should have a witness. I signed. He signed, his hand slower than it used to be, but steady on the line. Tom signed beneath us both. I folded that single page and carried it against my chest, like it was worth more than the 40,000. I just didn't know yet how much more. Because that fall, my grandfather died. A short, sharp illness, fast enough to be a mercy. And 2 weeks after the funeral, we gathered in the office of an attorney named Marion Holt for the reading. My father walked in confident. He was the only son. He ran the business. The holdings would pass to him, clean and whole. The bank would exhale, and his tower would hold. He'd even needled me that morning. After this is settled, maybe you'll stop playing business and go earn your own somewhere else. There it was again. The same sentence. Go earn your own. He took the head of the table without asking, and then Marion opened her folder and explained that Walter had not left a simple will. Years earlier, while plainly competent, he'd placed the bulk of his estate into a trust. My father's confidence flickered. Then Marion read the condition Walter had attached to the controlling interest in Stone Lumber and Supply. It would pass to the heir who had, during Walter's of lifetime, built a business or a fund of their own, documented, in writing, with consideration, and a witness, and then the room went completely silent. Every head did the same arithmetic, and arrived, one by one, at the same impossible answer. My father's hands flattened on the table. My mother turned and looked at me, and Marion reached into the folder and drew out an envelope with my name on it in Walter's belt, unsteady hand, and slid it the length of the table, past my father, past Ryder, past every staring eye, and told me to open it there, in front of everyone. Inside was a letter and a single page of trust documentation. The proof of the condition, named specifically, was a 1-page term sheet, dated the previous spring, signed by Walter Stone, Grace Stone, and one witness. The 40,000 had never only been a bet. It was a key he'd cut months in advance, to a door he knew I'd one day have to walk through. The letter ended, I'm not betting on the loud one. I bet on the one who showed up. You earned your name long before anyone gave you a dime. I just made it official. Times my father came up out of his chair. He said his father was confused, senile, manipulated. He said I'd tricked a signature out of a dying old man. And the louder he screamed, the smaller the screaming made him. I didn't shout back. I've never won anything by being the loudest. I waited until he ran out of breath. Then I reached into my bag, set the term sheet on the table beside Walter's letter, 3 signatures, dated months before he was anything but sharp, and I said the only thing left to say. You told me to go earn my own. I kept my voice as level as still water. So I did. This is what my own looks like. The weeks after were not dramatic, and I'm glad. Drama is what got us into this. As successor trustee, I kept Stone Lumber open. I made payroll the first Friday, and every Friday after. I sat down with the bank and laid the books bare, and we restructured my father's loan into something honest and survivable. I didn't crush him. Crushing him would have cost the town its jobs, and cost me my grandfather's name, and neither was for sale. I offered Ryder a real job, hours, targets. The first month nearly killed his pride, but somewhere in the second, he stopped performing and started working. My father never thanked me, and I never asked him to. We speak now in the language of business, the only language we ever shared honestly. It isn't warmth. It isn't nothing. My mother said one thing that ended it all, almost to herself, looking at the page on that table. She carries the name now. She never apologized. Seeing isn't the same as changing, but she could no longer pretend she didn't know. Here's the only lesson I'll hand you. A name that's given to you can always be taken back. But a name you earn yourself, with your own 2 hands and a set of clean books, is yours for good. And no announcement, in any rented hall, can ever call it back.